Whole Foods Market Catering has flavors to wow your crowd. September 20th through October 17th, you can save 20% on your next catering order with promo code Fall Catering. All one word. From game day hosting to birthday parties, now's the time to dazzle guests with the chef-curated menu from Whole Foods Market with a build-your-own-taco bar, grilled veggie platters, and even sushi. Visit shop.wfm.com and use promo code Fall Catering for 20% off today. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. What do your music playlists and podcast feeds have in common? They're a reflection of you. And that's how the State Farm Personal Price Plan works, too. It gives you options to personalize your coverage so you can protect what you care about most at an affordable price that's just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Go to statefarm.com today to create your State Farm Personal Price Plan. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Go! The kick ahead, and Duffy's chasing it. The bounce sits up. The Dragons are steamrolling to week 2 of the finals.
Inside the last 10 seconds of the game, St George, Illawarra to the death, trying. Brown goes to the air. Going back is Mabel, leaping high and taking it in marvellous fashion with Rod Wishart. He has scored an incredible try and ties this ball game up. Bartram from 18 metres out, he strikes it nicely. St George Illawarra win for the first time in their premiership line. Here's Nathan Blacklock down the sideline, chipping over the top of Joel Kane. Got a room surface bounce to win the game for the Dragons and book himself a New South Wales Blues origin jumper.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Red V podcast. Jack Clifton and Curtis Woodward with you to guide you through everything about the mighty St George Illawarra Dragons as we take another step, another week into the Dragons off-season. And we also reach grand final week in the NRL. Congratulations to both the Penrith Panthers and the Brisbane Broncos and their respective fan bases. No doubt delighted. I know it around this time, 13 years ago, when the Dragons qualified for the 2010 grand final. It was a memory that probably won't be surpassed in terms of my sporting fandom, apart from obviously the Dragons the following week winning the premiership. But I don't know what Curtis Woodward thinks and what the fans think. But qualifying for a grand final, especially when you haven't been in one for some time, is such a delirious feeling. So congratulations to both fan bases. One of them is going to be happier than the other, but nothing can take away from qualifying for a grand final. A great achievement there. Another big episode of the podcast tonight. It's going to be headlined by our part 2 chat with Wally Fullerton-Smith. Wally played with the Dragons, the St George Dragons, between 1987 and 1992. Looking forward to delving more into his time at the Dragons under Roy Masters and playing throughout the late 80s. We'll talk about that midweek Panasonic Cup win by the Dragons in 1988 under Ted Glossop there, but also some of the troubles the Dragons had in the late 80s, and also playing under Brian Smith and finishing his career over in France, and also some of the really great stuff that he does with the Menor League Foundation, and he has been doing that for some time, Wally. Looking forward to playing that for you a little bit later on in the podcast. Alongside that, we've got your latest Dragons news and updates. We'll continue to chat about Shane Flanagan. It's almost like the Dragons Way Tour, as he calls it, saying and doing some wonderful things that are certainly giving the Dragons fans some optimism for 2024, and we'll answer your fans' corner questions as well. Kurt Ward has been very good to give up some time during the off-season, during grand final week, to chat everything St George Illawarra with us. Kurt, a very good evening to you, mate, and regardless of our two fledgling clubs not being in the final series, not being in the grand final, it is a very exciting time. I wouldn't say it's a somber time, but it's a little bit bittersweet because I think we get to this stage of the season and it's fantastic because we know we're going to see a great grand final between two wonderful sides, but it also means we're not going to have any club rugby league now for kind of 5 or 6 months.
It's a shame. Look, I don't know how much I can talk tonight, Jack. I've been told by my management that we're still waiting for an extension from the Red V podcast admin for next year. So, look, I don't know. I'm up for grab, guys. If there's a Bulldogs, no, I'm just joking.
No.
Look, great to be back, Jack. And it is grand final week. And look, sometimes on Twitter I might get a bit emotional about different things on social media, but at the end of the day, I'm a purist of the game. And this week I'm thinking about the players and the coaches for those two clubs. It's a mighty thing just to get to a grand final, and for the Panthers, the chance to, like, people are already starting to link them to the Dragons of the 50s and 60s, and obviously a different era. But for the Broncos too, what a chance for them! It's been a long time coming. It's an exciting part of the season for me. I'm a bit of a footy nerd, a bit like yourself, Jack. And obviously we've got cricket coming up, but some test match football, which is amazing. So just happy to be back on the podcast. And unfortunately, no Dragons this year for you Dragons fans in the finals or grand final day. But look, when it does come around again, I hope I'm still on the podcast when that happens, because it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be great, especially having waited for so long and had so many barren years. But there is optimism for 2024, and that's what we're going to talk about next here on our Dragons News and Updates as the Shane Flanagan tour continues for the mighty Red V. Well, it's been called the Shane Flanagan Dragons Way Tour, or at least that's what we're calling it here at the Red V podcast. Shane Flanagan continues to make waves for all the right reasons at the Dragons. The head coach for 2024 recently held a Red V breakfast for former players, for media, I guess different kind of people in the media. Some fans were invited, as well as sponsors and different people that are involved with the club. I think it was compared by Lara Pitt from Fox League, and there was certainly some really positive things that came out of that. And I guess on top of that, Kurt, is the fact that Shane Flanagan is looking outside the club. He's looking outside the Dragons to try and find people that can inspire and that can lead. We've spoken about Ben Hunt until we're blue in the face in terms of leadership, and Mark Taylor, I guess one of our favourite cricket players of recent years, Kurt, from us growing up in a similar era. Growing up watching Mark Taylor reeling off centuries and that incredible 334 not out against Pakistan over there in Karachi in 1998, and a St George fan as well to boot. He's going to be trying to get him on board to help the Dragons about leadership, because we've spoken about the lack of leadership that's been shown by Ben Hunt, but underneath him there isn't really any leaders being developed by the Dragons. So Shane Flanagan has obviously seen that is an issue, and he wants to get Mark Taylor involved. There was also former players there. Ricky Walford, Matt Elliott, Mark Coyne, the great Dragons captain, was also there. And it seemed like it was a really positive atmosphere, a really positive vibe. We kind of spoke about it on our social media channels on Friday. But positive work again from Flanagan. It seems to be everything he's doing at the moment. He's hitting out of the ballpark for a home run. Kurt, I like Mark Taylor being involved. I like Mark Coyne being involved. There was a picture of them in what was the old Down Under bar, which we've joked about plenty of times here on the podcast. And if you chat with any of those St George players from the 1990s, it was a regular haunt for a lot of those Dragons players after victories at Cogra Oval. But down in the old Down Under bar now is, of course, that wonderful Spirit of the Red V Museum with great pictures and jerseys and footballs and new things being updated in there constantly. But they had a picture there, Mark Coyne, Mark Taylor and Shane Flanagan in front of, I think it was Reg Gasnier and Norm Provan, those famous names. And it's not just the future that he's looking at, but he's looking to absorb and also connect with the past as well, Kurt. And it seems really positive at the moment. It certainly made me positive. It certainly got a lot of Dragons fans looking to the future with excitement, and I don't think we've felt this for probably close to 15 years here at the St George Illawarra Dragons.
Yeah, it's interesting because like anyone could have walked in and said two words, anything positive, and it's much more than what you've heard in the last couple of years. But Flanagan has gone further than that, and he's now showing his hand. I can't remember how many times I've flipped over on a Sunday morning to the Wild World of Sports show, and Mark Taylor's there, and he's talking about the Dragons, and he's trying to be upbeat and all that kind of stuff. There's similarities between Mark Taylor, the captain, and also Mark Coyne, the player, as well, in the fact that I love Tubby Taylor because he's like me. He's a overweight opening left-hand bat, but tactically probably arguably the greatest captain of any sporting team this nation's ever produced, and knew how to lead players. And I think Mark Coyne, again, maybe in the modern game, Jared Croker, when Croker was at his best, I would say that as well. Coyne was a very classy player, but had to play up against bigger bodies. But was also a truly great leader that could speak well and got the best out of his play. So Flanagan is being very selective, but it's almost ingenious what he's doing. He's creating momentum from nothing. And look, Lara Pitt as well. She's one of my Dragons fan too. So, look, it wasn't hard to kind of improve what the momentum was under previous coaching. But look, I kind of said from the start, Flanagan, this is his last chance to change his legacy, and he could be a 10-year coach, 15-year coach of the Dragons. There's no doubt about that. And he's making everything he does is a positive so far. And I think the players are eventually. Look, I know a lot of these kids only have Instagram, and might go, "Oh, Mark Taylor, he played for Australia in cricket, didn't he?" But once they start speaking to him and they engage and they go home and kind of start looking at some history about these people and why they love the club that much, and they don't have to be Dragons players. I think that's going to turn around quite quickly. So, yeah, bravo Shane Flanagan. Like you said, the tour continues, and he will not stop. This is great. I'm sure he's enjoying this part of it, but I guarantee he's got one eye on day one of preseason training. More importantly, so a great start. The only way is up for the Dragons at the moment.
Yeah, really changing the Dragons culture, which is something that has needed to be addressed for a long time. Just from Fox Sports, they reported on this earlier this morning. Dave Riccio, the Daily Telegraph journo, he was there. He was speaking to SEN and had these words to say. He said, "We all know that Tubby Taylor was a tragic Dragons fan. I was fortunate enough to attend a Dragons breakfast, and it was basically Flanagan's plan to drag the team out of the cellar. Also in the room was Mark Taylor, who got up on stage and spoke about the passion for the Red V. Anytime you can get someone of Mark Taylor's quality around your dressing room, and especially with this leadership void around the Dragons, is a great idea." He goes on further to say, when Ben Hunt doesn't captain the Dragons, they are left to appoint Jack de Belin, which is always a polarising decision. Then it's left to Blake Laurie, who is emerging as a genuine and passionate leader. Mark Taylor's influence in coming back to the club is a great idea. Taylor himself told the Sydney Morning Herald that he just wants to see the team do better and is keen to help in whatever way Flanagan wants. He said, "There's no doubt they can do better. I'm happy to lend my support. I've spoken to Shane a couple of times on the phone the past couple of weeks. If he wants me to be involved and chat to the leaders, I would love to be involved. I would love to see them playing well. I don't think they are as far away from that as some people think. I'd love to be part of them, helping them there." So it's looking like he'll come in as some type of leadership coach in a non-footballing capacity, but someone that could certainly really help the Dragons move forward. That's really positive news. And I guess on top of that, Flanagan also kind of said in that chat that although he did say he wanted 3 or 4 signings, it may look like he doesn't sign that number of players, and he's happy with the quality he's got at the club. That's certainly going to be out on judgment for what we see next year, but at least he's positive about the playing group that he currently has at the Dragons. Talking of potential players the Dragons might be signing, there was one that popped up this morning. The Mole and News Corp have both been reporting that the Dragons may be in the frame to sign Jaden Brayley, the young hooker, former Shark up there at the Newcastle Knights. Tore his ACL at the start of the season, has had some injury problems in the past, but would be an interesting signing, I guess more so for the fact, Kurt, that the Dragons seem to have kind of really locked up a few players in that dummy half position. You've got Kyle Flanagan, who we assume is going to play hooker or some kind of hybrid number 14 role for the Dragons. They've recently re-signed Connor Mull-Eisen on a 1-year contract. You've got Jacob Little, who was there last year. So if they sign Jaden Brayley, that would be a 4th player in that dummy half role. I guess whenever there's quality players around, you're not going to say no to them. And having four hookers is 4 decent hookers or 4 players that can play in that number 9 role is better than 3. But what do you make of this situation? Is it too much to read into it that might mean Kyle Flanagan plays in the halves if they go after Jaden Brayley? I guess the other thing also, Kurt, is we don't know if this is 100% true. You've got to take it with a grain of salt, but I guess it is positive the Dragons are trying to sign quality players. There's not many out on the open market, and Jaden Brayley is one that, although coming back from a couple of pretty serious injuries, could be a player that could really help the Dragons.
Yeah, look, I don't mind it in the sense that not long ago, the Dragons' rotation at dummy half was Andrew McCulloch, who was on his last legs. That probably should have never come to the club in the first place. And then the backup was, I think, Moses Umbai.
And they played Josh Maguire back there a couple of years ago as well.
I forgot about him. So then from there, obviously, like for all intents and purposes, Jacob Little has that starting position for as long as he wants it and keeps performing. But I would guess if they got him down to the Dragons from the Knights, so same like an Umbai and even Maguire as your, if you want to use an NFL term like depth, your depth chart. At one point, that was your depth chart for dummy half. And for less money, you potentially have 4 players, and Little being the starting dummy half. The fact that Crossland finished the season so strongly at the Knights, the way he did. Brayley started the year, he started as the dummy half. He played 5 of the first 6 games, did his ACL. But when he did sign with the Knights, I know the Sharks were very high on him, but had to squeeze him out. He played 24 games for the Sharks in 2019. I think the Sharks had a choice to make between him and his brother. The fact is he's done his ACL twice now over 3 or 4 years. It's a long road back to his best, which means for the Dragons, dollar signs and potential. And if he starts as 3rd or 4th string and maybe even spends 3/4 of next year fit playing reserve grade, that's good. Because
he's still young, Kurt, and youth isn't something the Dragons have had a lot of lately.
Yeah, and if they can get him, it would be a very similar road back to top grade and playing professionally week to week as Jacob Little had with the West Tigers. Like I said, lots of injuries between the two, so that there are some parallels. He is contracted to the Knights until the end of 2025. Yeah, but I think there's something here in the fact that I think both clubs would look at this and say, all right, if we split the coin here on Brayley, the Knights get him off their books because they're not sure he's going to get back to where they maybe thought he was going to be when they signed him. And the Dragons might be looking at this going, okay, we're going to get him half price, but if we can get him back and be patient with him, because now we've got some depth with the guys you just mentioned, Little starting and then, Cole Flanagan filling some gaps and Mulhausen after that, I think this has worked out perfectly for both clubs. So, look, Tony Adams or the Mole, I would categorise him as a mate in regards to, online and contacts and stuff like that. Sometimes he gets a bad rap, but I think there's something to this. I think it makes sense, and I think the Dragons would be silly not to look at it if the Knights are willing to offload him and pay some of his contract for the next couple of years.
Good news story here on the Red V podcast. I had this sent to me from a couple of people, and I know the Dragons have tweeted it as well. But someone on one of the Facebook groups down in Narra said that they took their youngest for a haircut today at Jab Cats in Berkeley. Great, in commas, great players, well-mannered and very friendly. We ran into Tyrell Sloan and Jack Bird doing the same, and we were chatting away to my son. And to my surprise, when I went to pay for my son's haircut, Tyrell Sloan had paid for it. What a lovely young man. They made my 9-year-old's day. Go the Dragons. Which, there's a lot of negative things in the media about rugby league players, but Tyrell Sloan, time and time again, has shown what a class human being he is, and they're the kind of people you want around your club. Him and Jack Bird didn't have to do that. Rugby league players aren't obligated to chat to fans or anything like that, but they do it out of the goodness of their heart. And we've got a real good one in Tyrell Sloan. I know his players kind of divided Dragons fans, but I would encourage fans to look past just not just the ability on the field and see what people are doing off the field. So bravo to Tyrell Sloan and Jack Bird. I've kind of heard plenty of stories of Tyrell Sloan. He's a really great guy out in the community, and that's really good to hear. A bit of a good news story here on the Red V podcast. And our last bit of Dragons news we wanted to make you aware of was something that dropped last week with young Dragons forward Jacob Halangahu is going to be joining the Dragons top 30 squad in 2025. He's recently put his name on the dotted line, extending his time at the Dragons for 2 years. I believe he was the captain of the St George Dragons SG Ball, their under-19 side last year. No, might have been Harold Matthews Cup. I have to get confirmation on that. I'm sure people will let me know. I think it might have been the Harold Matthews Cup side, the under-17 side. And he's a wonderful player. Comes from the Penrith Brothers Club and has been in the St George system, I think, since about the age of 15. A really good, hard-working player in the middle, wonderful tackler and a physical player. And he could be one to keep an eye on in future years for the Dragons. So great to see the Dragons promoting some of that youth. And I know Jacob was pretty delighted to sign that contract with the Dragons. He's also an Australian schoolboy, and he's only 17 years of age, having played for that Australian under-20 side. He did say it's pretty surreal at the moment, and hasn't really sunk in. I'm over the moon to get it done. I'm top 30 end of next year. I'll move down to Wollongong from Sydney, get that under my belt, and see where it goes. So I wish Jacob all the best, and it'd be great to have another one of those quality young players, an Australian schoolboy rep as well, wearing the red V in the future for the Dragons. We're going to continue our top 25 countdown of the best St George Illawarra players from 1999 through to today to celebrate the 25-year anniversary of the St George Illawarra Dragons, which did happen on September 23 of 1998. So we've just gone past the 25-year mark. And the player that we've chosen for number 23, we chose Bo Scott last week in spot number 24 and Mark Riddell in spot number 25. So number 23 is Cam McInnes, the former Dragons skipper. Unfortunately, he isn't at the club anymore, and for whatever reason, the Dragons thought it was wise to move him on. I'm sure there's plenty of fans that didn't agree with that and still don't agree with that at this time. But a wonderful player, wonderful servant, hard-working player in the middle of the park for the Dragons, and as we've seen at the Sharks, has developed into a really quality 13, whether playing off the bench or playing big minutes in the middle. One of those players that is a wonderful leader, and the Dragons could really use his leadership at the moment. That leadership void was spoken about. Partly the Dragons are feeling that because of the departure a couple of seasons ago of Cameron McInnes. A wonderful player. So he gets spot number 23, Kurt, on our St George Illawarra top 25 countdown. A wonderful player and continues to go from strength to strength, unfortunately, at the Dragons' major crosstown rivals, the Cronulla Sharks.
Geez, just while you were chatting away there, Jack, I was just thinking some of these games this year, and not even this year, but some other moments where you really needed someone to crack their own team over the head in the in goal and lead by example. That's the kind of bloke you've been missing, and not just a hard head that can cover a couple of positions, but a rep player, and a leader. A true leader. That would be a representing player in any era of the comp. So that says a lot about Cameron McInnes. I believe he was up there playing for Prime Minister's 13 on the weekend. So, and he was so close to playing Blues this year. I mean, I thought he actually played Game 3, but I looked it up today and he didn't make the cut. So, a tremendous player, and I think the Dragons. If you wanted to make a list, Jack, if you ever wanted to write a cutting piece, the 81st minute about the 25 dumb things the Dragons have done in the last 10 years, that would be in there somewhere. The high up would be letting Cameron McInnes go, not just to your rivals, but just letting him leave the club. I mean, I'll leave that one there, mate. But, a fantastic player that should have played so many more games for the Dragons and still be there today.
Yep, totally agree with that, Kurt. Let's jump into our Dragons history. Only the one match to speak of this week. It was in this week back in 2010 that St George Illawarra took out the premiership, defeating the Sydney Roosters by 32 points to 8 on grand final day at the Olympic Stadium. 82,334 in probably similar conditions we've had today. A little bit of drizzle, a bit of a cool day there out in Olympic Park, and the Dragons winning thanks to a double to Jason Nightingale, Mark Gasnier, Dean Young, and Nathan Feen tries. Soward had a day out with the boot, 6 goals from 7 attempts. They did trail at halftime after tries to Mitch Orbison and Braithen Astor, and Todd Carney missing both of the attempts at goal. But the Dragons came in and scored 26 unanswered points in the second half, a purely dominant performance. And I can still remember those images of Jason Nightingale in ecstasy, having scored a couple of tries on the wing that put the Dragons in command. And then a couple of the hookers, Dean Young and Nathan Feen, driving the nail into the heart as the Dragons Dragons lifted the premiership in 2010. The last time they tasted success, it's been 13 long years, but hopefully Shane Flanagan has the club on the right path for the future. It was a great night, and I'm sure there was plenty of fans there at Homebush at Olympic Park that would have been enjoying a few drinks before the game, but especially after the game with the Dragons, getting a comfortable win by 32 points to 8 to take out the premiership for season 2010. Before we wrap up our Dragons news and update section, let's run through some birthdays for this week, and we've got some absolute legends to get through. First, it's going to be celebrating a birthday in a couple of days on Thursday, in fact. Unfortunately, no longer with us. We lost Eddie Lumsden on the 6th of October 2019, but he'll be celebrating what would have been, I believe, his 89th birthday, if he was still alive with us. A legend of the club. He was voted into the National Rugby League Hall of Fame in 2008. He played 161 games for the St George Dragons, 137 tries, and had a remarkable record. He only lost 17 games for the Dragons in his whole career, so had an 88% win rate. He spent time with the New South Wales side. He played 17 games for Australia, scoring 9 tries. He also played 18 games for New South Wales, scoring 16 tries. There wasn't too many sides that he didn't represent. He started his career off with Manly in 1955, but back then, when they had the residency rules, he wasn't living in the Manly region, so couldn't play for them anymore. And of course, Frank Facer snapped him up, as he did with a lot of quality players in that time. But had a wonderful career, 18 tries and 16 games in his first season in 1957. The hallmark year for him was 1962, where he played 17 games, scored 21 tries, and also knocked over 11 goals to finish with 85 season points as the Dragons won the premiership, and finished his career in 1966 scoring 9 tries as the Dragons again won another premiership and their 11th in a row. So a wonderful career, a wonderful player. We hear stories about these guys, Kurt, all the time, but any time that you can be such a prolific try scorer, someone like Eddie Lumsden, again, just shows the talent the Dragons had within that camp. And he's unfortunately not with us anymore, but we salute him. We remember him of such a wonderful player, such a wonderful human being, and being such a part of a wonderful rugby league side in those years in the late 50s into the mid to late 1960s.
Yeah, and the thing I think about too is when we talk about these older players, and it's not their fault when they're born, is how would they go today? And he would seriously be in the New South Wales and Australian team every year in 2023 in the modern era. A truly great player that when you think about Dragons players, you think about the ones that went to other clubs. You go, oh yeah, the Dragons. They work. That yes, they had this thing about them and this prestige and all this stuff. But if he went to another club, he would score as many tries for another club as he did at the Dragons. And yes, they played in a different era too, and they didn't have the space they have today. It's a completely different game. So again, if you're talking about different eras, if you send a player back in a time machine now, they would have no idea what Eddie Lumsden can do, and he'd run rings around them every day of the week. Same as if you put Eddie, if you want to talk about Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner when he gets the Chicago Black Sox and all that stuff. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. I love thinking about it, but a true legend of the game that had no choice but to play in his era. So let's not denigrate them at all, because they would be as good as they are today if they had their weights, body sizes, and he'd be taller today. Just the genes of people as they get bigger and professional athletes and stuff like that. I would love to hear. I think we spoke about Jeff Armstrong offline, and you got something going on with his book. I'd love to hear what his thoughts on how he would compare players from different eras, and maybe he might say, "Oh no, it's not fair," but I think it is fair. I think Lumsden would be an absolute killer today and one of the classiest players in the game. And look, he got it done. He went 10 years at the Dragons, 9 premierships. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a pretty good record.
Yeah, and look, a truly great player. And if his family listens today to the podcast or whatever, you should be very proud. I guess what would it be now? Grandfather, great grandfather. But great player of the Dragons. And when you think about the best players of the Dragons, some people that don't really get into the Dragons history, and I'm not a Dragons fan, but I love the history. He's one of the first 5 or 6, 7 players I think of off the top of my head if I was at pub trivia or whatever. So happy birthday, Eddie.
Also, someone celebrating a birthday this forthcoming Thursday is Trevor Bailey, the former St George hooker. He'll be turning 62 on Thursday. He carved a name for himself up in the old Brisbane Rugby League competition with the Brothers Club. He played 132 games for them, 42 tries, 63 goals and a field goal between 1980 and 87, and then went and played another year with him in 1991. He played for them in the 1987 grand final, and then with a bunch of other players that included, Mark Coyne and a few others that came down to St George, played 66 games for the Dragons across 3 seasons. Unfortunately, not very successful seasons at the Dragons. They'd lost a lot of quality players. There wasn't much money around the club. Coaching probably wasn't where it needed to be, but he did win the midweek 1988 Panasonic Cup and also spent time coaching Wakefield Trinity across the 1986 and 1987 season. So a hard-working play in the middle of the park for the Dragons, and we hope that Trevor's having a cold one and enjoying his 62nd birthday on Thursday, the 28th of September. The next player that we want to tip our hat to and celebrate their birthday this week, and it's coming across the weekend, across grand final weekend, is former Dragon and Raider Paul Osborne, the big prop. He was a consistent performer for the Dragons throughout his period in these total of 135 first-grade games. He played with St George between 1986 and 1991, and then moved on to Canberra and played 3 seasons there, but more famously had that incredible performance in the 1994 grand final where Canberra beat Canterbury to lift up a premiership in Mal Meninga's final year. But before that, he played 84 games for the St George Dragons, scoring just 1 try between 1986 and 1991. A hard-working player, strong through the middle of the park. Unfortunately, it didn't really come together at the Dragons, probably a combination of coaching and not having many quality players around him when you think of those sides of kind of 87, 88, 89, 90, and even 1991, Brian Smith's first year. They were just starting to move towards something, the Dragons. So it was great to see him finish his career, albeit not with the Dragons, but winning a premiership. He was unfortunately kind of forced into retirement at the age of 28, although he did go and play with West Belconnen in the local Canberra competition, which isn't bad to go and play that level when you've just won a premiership in the New South Wales Rugby League, and of course has worked in commentary and other things kind of post his footy career. So we say a very happy birthday to Paul Osborne. He'll be celebrating his 57th birthday on Saturday, so a very happy birthday to you, Paul. We've got a couple others coming up across the weekend. First is the former goal kicker and winger for the Dragons, Ian Chook Heron for the Dragons, played in the 1992 and 1993 grand finals for the Dragons. He was the leading point scorer in those seasons as well, 6 tries, 40 goals, and 104 points in 1992, and 13 games, 2 tries, 45 goals, and 98 points for the Dragons in 93. He played a handful of games in 94, then went across to what they were then called the Sydney Tigers, but Balmain in 1996, and then a couple of seasons across at Para in 97 and also in 1998. I didn't play as many games as many would think. 74 games, 18 tries, 178 goals at 71.5%, which is a very good record, especially from playing in the 1990s, and was drafted into that Dragon side because they'd had a shocking record in 1992. They'd kicked 9 out of 26 goals across a 4 or 5 game stretch. He was brought in from reserve grader, and probably, despite not being as potent as perhaps other outside backs would be, his goal kicking was valuable and won games for the Dragons in that 92 season and helped them get to that decider, and also contributed heavily during the 1993 season. But Kurt, probably more well known for probably his goal kicking style than what he did on the field. He for those that never saw Ian Herring kick, he kind of would place the ball and he would move completely to one side, where it was almost kind of he was going to be kicking the ball over the sideline. He was really around the corner style kicker for the Dragons, but had a pretty good success rate and landed some pretty high pressure goals in those early 90 periods for the St George Dragons.
Yeah, look, I think I've said this before on the podcast. Is literally my first rugby league memory at a ground was still living on Gloucester Road at Hurstville and walking down the northern end. I don't know where we were. It might have been 5 or 6, but we were walking from the northern end behind the post around to the eastern grandstand, around that back part there, and hearing Simply the Best, Tina Turner, and then getting into the ground and seeing the first thing I saw was Ian Heron taking a shot from the sideline.
Yeah.
And the torpedo tights, which funnily enough, they did take off, because I remember wearing them years later at MacArthur Saints, a blue version as well. But look, a cult hero at the Dragons who may not have been very quick over a longer distance, but was still very nimble off his feet. And obviously, for a winger in that period, he had to take on some great outside backs. The Broncos, they had Willie Kahn and Michael Hancock and Renoff, and the Raiders had 1,000 players as well. I think he ended his rep career I think it was the 2000 World Cup. I think we were speaking about this before, but it was based on all these ringings, and the Irish just said, let's just take anyone from the NRL that their grandfather or whatever, or grandmother was Irish. And I think he might have been part of that team.
He was, 3 games, 1 try, 7 goals. And in all those, he only played in 1 World Cup game. He played 3 games for Ireland. That was in a triangular series. They beat Wales and Scotland, but he also played in 1 World Cup game against Scotland where they won 18-6.
Well, I'll tell you what, he would have had a good time on tour anyway. So happy birthday to Chook Heron. And one of those, like I said, Jack, like I've got a bucket of football cards underneath my desk where I'm speaking from right now, knee high, of just all these old footy cards. And just randomly, every couple of days, just for the sake of it, if I'm listening to something or watching telly or writing an article, and I look forward to the day I'll pull out a mighty 1993 Ian Heron card with the, running down the sideline. I say running down the sideline, but maybe looking for support or something like that. But he was a legend at the club in the terms that people enjoyed watching him play. So if you bank him up against other players at the time, you go, he might rank down lower with respect to him as a running winger, but people don't care about that. People remember Ian Heron because he tried his guts out, and he had a fantastic kicking style, which is completely weird. And funnily enough, for Steelers fans too, at the same time, the other weird goal kicker at the time was Rod Wisher.
Yeah, that's right.
He had the same spaghetti. He had spaghetti legs, but wasn't as square, a bit like Greg Alexander was as a goal kicker, like Heron was. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now. I can talk about Chook Heron all night. Happy birthday, Chook.
And last one is Steve Edge, legend of the club. You want to talk about, the 25 dumbest mistakes St George Illawarra made. Well, what about the dumbest mistakes St George ever made? Number 1, I think, was letting Steve Edge go after winning premierships in 77 and 79 with St George. He went across to Parramatta and won 3 straight titles with them. I think he might have also played in the 1986 grand final for Parramatta as well. Finished with 219 games, but really should have been one of those players that played for the Dragons for life. In fact, finished his career with Parramatta in 1984, so won premierships in 81, 82 and 83, and also won for St George in 77 and 79. A prolific career for him. 101 games for St George, 118 for Parramatta, and despite playing more games for Parramatta, he still has St George at heart. You often hear him chip in and have his say about events at the Dragons, and he's with former players, functions and those kinds of things. He's there. One of the greatest hookers that's ever played our game. Certainly one of the greatest hookers of the 1970s and 1980s. One of those really passionate leaders. And as Kurt kind of mentioned before, we were chatting with Jeff Armstrong yesterday. We're going to release that next week on the podcast. And he speaks about this, about how it was one of the worst mistakes by the Dragons community to let him go, and how that had a profound effect on the Dragons and Parramatta for that matter throughout the 1980s. So very happy birthday to Steve. He's going to be turning 72, still getting around, and still healthy and fighting fit. So we hope that continues. Hope he has a cold one as well for us, and we celebrate him and salute him on Monday on the public holiday, the Labor Day public holiday, as he celebrates birthday number 72. Before we finish off the news and updates section, we've got the Who Am I question, Kurt, and I thought I would throw it over to you tonight to see what we're going to do for the Who Am I, mate.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this up. I'm going to change it because we're trying to keep the fans for a little bit longer anyway. I just got a book this week, Jack, from the op shop, and it's called The Great Aussie Sports Quiz Book. And I think it's dated to 2004, but it also has trivia questions for clubs that are no longer with us as well. So I thought instead of doing who are we this week, I'm going to start, and if you get 5 from 5, we'll let it be. But if you get one wrong, I'm going to hit you with a Steelers question as well.
Okay.
All right. So this, guys, I've just thrown this to Jack. I've got the book.
There's no preparation here. This
He's
is
got no
this is
idea
right
what I'm
off. This is
talking
right
about.
off the
As
top of the
usual,
head.
He's got no idea what I'm talking about. And I've got the answers right at the bottom here. So first
Okay.
question, I'm pretty sure this guy's name came up a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
And this is probably not fair, and people might think this is the G-up. Question 1. Who holds the club record for most tries in a St. George Dragons season? 26 tries. I don't want the year. I'll give you. You know what?
I'm gonna say Tommy Ryan, 1957 for St. George.
Yeah. See, now people can think this is a G-up. Question 2. How many successive grand finals had St. George lost before they formed the joint venture club with Illawarra? Well, that's easy. How many did they lose before they joined the merger?
I believe it was 4 consecutive ones.
Yeah. You might just get a Steelers question after this anyway.
Yeah, that's all right.
Which player appeared in the grand finals for all 3 grades in '85?
I think we've chatted with him.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name. He was involved with Scientology.
Yeah. Do you want the first name? You get half a point.
Chris Guyder.
Yeah, correct. You might be on Google too right now.
No, I'm not. I promise. I've got Audacity up, and I'm just making sure that the waves are coming through, and we're not redlining, so people's ears don't get damaged.
Okay, one more, and then and I'm going to leave that one there because this is too easy. I told you it was easy before we recorded.
Well, ask me one more St. George question, and then fire a Steelers question at me, or even
a random Steelers question. All right. Who is the only St. George player to win the Clive Churchill medal?
Brad Mackay.
All right. Well, that's not fair.
93 against the Broncos, I believe.
All right, let's. Where's the Illawarra Steelers? All right, this is not good radio. All right, podcast. We might do Steelers next week then.
Yeah, well, just
I can't find them.
Just fire any random rugby league question at me. Sure, you.
Okay, anything random. Okay.
Well, that's it. That's in that book.
Yeah, no. Okay, it's in the book. Who holds the club record for the most appearances for Parramatta?
I'm just going to have a stab and say, is it Peter Sterling?
No, close. Brett Kenny.
Oh, Brett Kenny. I thought it might have been Ray Price at first, but I do remember kind of Sterling played until the early 90s, but he did have a lot of injuries. So, Brett Kenny. Okay. Well, I didn't get that one. Maybe someone would have, but that's good. I want to do a bit more of that. I think we've kind of toyed with the idea of potentially having like a Dragons trivia night one night, and it's something.
I think so.
Yeah, if you're kind of keen for that, fans, you would like to come along and hear Curtis and I compare and run our mouth, and and you'd be interested in that. Let us know, because we do want to do some more kind of face-to-face events and get to see the fans that loyally support us each week. But that was nice. That was a nice little change-up, Kurt. So thank you.
Way too easy for you, Jack.
Well, you need to come with some Steelers questions next week, or maybe some North Sydney Bears questions or something like that.
Fair enough.
Kurt, taking the reins there nicely on a bit of a different Who Am I this week on the Red V podcast. But we're going to take our first short break here on episode 193, and on the other side of that, we're going to be continuing our chat with Wally Fullerton-Smith. Wally is going to talk to us a bit more about playing under Roy Masters in the mid to late 1980s. The barren run the Dragons had throughout that late 80s period, and also ending his career under Brian Smith at the Dragons and moving across to playing in France, as well as a lot more. Looking forward to playing part 2 of our chat with Wally Fullerton-Smith next here on the Red V podcast.
Wait, are you gaming? On a Chromebook?
Yep. It's got a high-res 120Hz display, plus this killer RGB keyboard. And I can access thousands of games anytime, anywhere.
Stop playing.
What?
Get out of here.
Huh?
Yeah, I want you to stop playing and get out of here so I can game on that Chromebook.
Got it.
Discover the ultimate cloud gaming machine, a new kind of Chromebook.
Whole Foods Market Catering has flavors to wow your crowd. September 20th through October 17th, you can save 20% on your next catering order with promo code FALLCATERING. All one word. From game day hosting to birthday parties, now's the time to dazzle guests with the chef-curated menu from Whole Foods Market with a build-your-own taco bar, grilled veggie platters, and even sushi. Visit shop.wfm.com and use promo code FALLCatering for 20% off today. Terms apply.
Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. This fall, the Disney Bundle has all the action.
Holy smokes!
Watch live NFL and college football games on ESPN Plus. On Disney Plus, there's Loki Season 2.
War is on its way.
And Ahsoka.
Buckle up.
And on Hulu, you can watch The Boogeyman and Welcome to Wrexham.
Oh my God, the expectation.
All of these and more streaming this fall with the Disney Bundle. Blackouts and restrictions apply. 18 plus only. Access content from each service separately. Offer valid for eligible subscribers only. Terms apply.
Yeah, look, and it was good. Roy used to get back at this is the training. You get back on the trial line and you kick the ball down us and you say, righto, bring it back to me and let me show you the shape of the team and how it goes and all the rest of it. You know? And that's, he had the worst kick on him. Could only get it about 15 yards back in those days. But his skill was his ability to make you believe in yourself and all that. He's very sort of psychology dependent, and everyone sort of stayed in touch. And all he wanted to do, which I remembered because in that my first year in 1987, we moved out of Cogra Oval because they were building a grandstand there, and our home ground was the Sydney Cricket Ground, So it was a big thing, and all Roy wanted to do last game of the year, I think we just missed out on the semis, and was to beat West. I think he was coaching West back then, Ryan, and we beat him, 10 minutes before the end of the year, and he was as happy as a pig in what. So he loved it, Roy. But I quite enjoyed his character, and I've sort of met him a few times. Some coaches you don't have that same affinity with,
no,
particularly if they're yelling and screaming. And now this generation of players, if they were sitting in a dressing room, how we used to get spoken to by the coach at half time or full time or what it might be, there'd only be half the team left there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put up with what we used to cop there from the coaches, but that's just how it was.
Yeah.
Jack, we had nothing to do. That's just how things have evolved now with the video, replays and so forth, and and how the Craig Bellamy's and all the rest of it have really professionalised and coached differently to back in the old days. It's really come forward. And look, I love watching. I watch all the games of the footy. Some people with past careers don't even worry about the football, but I love the footy. And
it's great to hear.
Love how it was, and I love watching it. So, but there's no Thursday footy on tonight. But tomorrow it's the Broncos and Storm, so that'll be a great game. So that's how things have changed. The way players are professional now, and you can see how that's permeated down through the ranks to young players wanting to get up in the big league, and obviously they're money orientated too. But at the end of the day, it's about trying to get as far up that chain as you can with the skills you've got, because we're not all Darren Lockyers or Wally Lewis's or whatever else, So you gotta simplify things and what is my best attribute? I've got good defence. I'm a good talker. People want to play with you and all the rest of it. That's. And that still happens now, I think, So.
It sounds like it would have been a pretty unique experience to be playing at the Sydney Cricket Ground. I know kind of when we kind of chat with fans or you chat with people about that era, some people didn't like it. Obviously, the crowds weren't massive. It was a bit of a trip for fans to get from places like Mortdale and Hurstville out to the Sydney Cricket Ground. What was your individual experience of playing at the SCG in 87? And then I think in 1988 you were playing home games at Belmore.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Well, the best part was I'll be in the dressing room. I'm thinking, I reckon Donald Bradman would have sat here. That's what I was thinking about the whole time, And I thought, this is fabulous because they had still the old, structure from back in the 40s,
Yeah.
So, and when you get out in the middle of that field, I remember playing an Origin game there in 1984. And I could have been in Perth, like you're that far away from the crowd and all the rest of it. And the cricket pitch, it was hard in the middle of the oval. But that's how we were. That's how it was picked. And for us, our first year was, my first year at the Dragons that was our home game. And then come 88, well, after we finished it there at Belmore too. Was getting back to Cogra and having a base for all your supporters. They have such the South fraternity and the Dragons fraternity have such a big fan base, and they want us to be successful because of the previous exploits of the players and all the rest of it. So it was a great experience for a country boy from Roma.
Yeah, I've heard Roy Masters speak about it before, and he said he hated it because the fact was that teams loved going to the SCG because obviously that's where the semi-finals and the grand finals were and all that history, and St George didn't get much of an advantage. But I can certainly see it from your point of view, Wally, that it would have been such a great experience. And as a massive cricket head myself, I think I probably would have been thinking the same thing. From some of those wonderful players that represented New South Wales and Australia, and I guess the moving around probably would have been a little bit disruptive to players. So it probably would have been great relief when St George eventually made it back to Cogra in 1989, and you could see a kind of a full house of red and white rather than them being kind of speckled in amongst the 40,000 seats in the SCG.
That's spot on, mate. That's exactly right.
In your time that you're at the Dragons, Wally, you kind of rotated through a few different coaches. Roy Masters retired at the end of 1987. Ted Glossop came in 1988, and then there was obviously Craig Young for a couple of years, and then your last year was was when Brian Smith was at the club. Did you find that disruptive as a player? Because I guess you're not always going to have a lot in common with a coach, and maybe you don't even play your best football under certain coaches. How did you find the revolving door of coaches of St George in that kind of late 1980s into the early 1990s at the Dragons?
Well, that's a very good question, actually, and something that's funny. I hadn't sort of really thought about that, but you're quite right. We had not so much a turmoil, but you didn't have someone there that, like nowadays, 3 or 4 years for the current coach to get something out of his team, if you know what I mean. And have a look at what Newcastle have done the last 9 matches, with O'Brien. But, it was sort of disruptive, Teddy Glossop, he'd had his year. It's like Joe Biden, huddling around, I don't want to be disrespectful to him, but, he sort of like happened to be sort of way behind what was going on with all the other clubs. And, And then obviously it was a shame Woodward finished after 1 year. Then Ted Glossop come in. Then Big Albert, Craig Young sort of coached for a couple of years. And then I think when we really got professional was when Brian Smith had and sometimes he gets a bit prickly to, get things going.
Had a few stories,
but look, the end of the day, he professionalised us, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We had real tactics, going into a match, defensively, attacking wise, and all the rest of it. Because some of the clubs there were way ahead of us and all that sort of phases, as the game evolved, and he sort of brought that professionalism in the club, I think, Brian. So, and we had a couple of good years there. Went along to Parramatta then, and now he's sitting at, I think, in northern New South Wales, somewhere on the water. Good luck to him.
I guess the shining light in that period as a St George player, Wally, is in 1988, where St George win their one and only midweek competition, the 1988 Panasonic Cup. You guys beat Balmain in the final, 16-8, I think, at the old Parramatta Stadium. Can you talk us through, I guess, some of your memories or recollections from that tournament? Because I guess for me as a bit of a younger fan, it's so hard for me to wrap my head around that the players these days complain if they've got to play one game a week, let alone you guys kind of playing on a Sunday, backing up on a Wednesday, and then playing again on a Saturday or a Sunday. Did you enjoy that aspect of playing in the midweek in this competition?
Well, it's funny you should say that. It's something you probably don't think about it, because that was just part of how that midweek comp went, and obviously I was always been a good stretcher. You stretch up all the time. Keep yourself sort of, particularly in my role defensively. Crook neck, because Arthur beats it. And we'll see. His idea was, right, Wally, you've got such a good technique there, mate. You aim straight at the player with your head, and then automatically get out of the way, and away you go. But what we didn't realise is there's plenty of Brad footers out there and all the rest of them. You're stepping straight into their hips, But what was the question there? Sorry.
Oh, just your recollections and your memories of that Panasonic Cup, and I guess even the victory in the final.
Yeah, I do, because remember Brian Johnson, our captain, ran straight through the centre of the opposition and scored it onto the post, and that was it. We won the game with 10 to go, something like that. It was fantastic about it, really, and I think it was probably downplayed a little bit by the wonderful, history of the Dragons. We didn't get a lot of kudos for that, but it's a shame we couldn't carry that through into the semi-finals. That was probably the sad part about it.
I guess moving on from there, it was probably a pretty difficult time to play for St George. I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit before, Wally. Ted Glossop coaching in 1988, and he leaves after 1 year, and then Craig Young as coach in 1989 and 1990, and I think probably even by kind of Albert's own recollections, I guess similar to Nathan Brown, probably one of those players that went into coaching perhaps a little bit too quickly, went from kind of being the one of the captains or leaders in that St George side to going into the coaching. What did you how did you get on with Albert, I guess, as a player, but then as a coach in those couple of years that he was leading the Dragons in a pretty tough period where the Dragons seemed to kind of rotate through a lot of players, as well as trying to get at some young guys like Brad Mackay and Mark Coyne and stuff into their system?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I think I had he said, mate, I want to have you as captain, so he had me as captain, and we lost or whatever. Then so that he flicked me and put Trevor Barley in as captain, and he stayed captain, and I got the wrong end of the bucket, basically, you'd say.
Yeah,
and it was a bit unfortunate, and it's hard to come straight out of. He had a lot of knowledge. He had beautiful ball playing skills, but he's also Big Albert. But also, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to understand other players' characteristics, and what's best for them, and or how can they help the team, and because it's a team game, and we probably struggled a little bit in those days, and we probably didn't have the right recruitment manager involved and all that sort of thing, and if you can see him now, if you go to a young under 16 match, you'll have an AFL what do you call it, an AFL
like recruitment officer,
bloke. You'll have a league bloke. You'll have a union bloke. You'll have athletics bloke there, because they're all looking for particularly size, height, weight, speed, all those particular characteristics. And yes, that bloke will suit our game, and that's what it's like now. And they were probably just slowly developing that at that time.
Even though it was a difficult period, I guess, in terms of a team approach and not necessarily playing in the semi-finals, you had some wonderful teammates around you. Obviously, one of the shining lights in that period was Ricky Walford, who was such an amazing winger, such an amazing outside back, could kick goals as well. We spoke about kind of Craig Young, but Brian Johnson, Graham Wynn. Must have been nice to play with not only mates and good friends, but some of those guys that were extremely talented.
Oh, fantastic. That's what makes your team. If you've got someone that can pull a rabbit out of the hat and make it try, or when you're under severe pressure or whatever else. And Ricky done that on a number of occasions, particularly there at Cogra. I remember him catching the ball in the in goal, stepping 2 or 3 players, and he scored at the other end of the field. So you need that sort of player that's got that intuition, speed, ability, and Ricky was stepped up wonderfully well for the Dragons back in my day. He was a great player.
We spoke briefly before, about Brian Smith coming in. So he comes in 1991 and then obviously continues into 1992, which was your last year. What was your relationship like with Brian? Because I know 1992 was your final year at the Dragons. Why did you depart the Dragons? Why did you move on at the end of 1992?
Well, that was sort of a bit of a thing. I broke my thumb earlier in the year. Then you wouldn't believe it. My next game back after a broken thumb, we kicked off and we ran down the field there, and one of my teammates tackled the opposition, and they ran into my knee, and I did a medial ligament in my knee. So you're sort of injured a little bit. Where it would have been great to go on, and that's what probably when I got the heads up to run on the field in grand final day, against the Broncos. I thought Matty Elliott probably deserved that position at the time, and I said to Brian, he said warm up, Wally, and I think I sort of probably it'd be probably best if Matty went and did that, because he probably deserved it better than me. And a lot of people said I was bloody mad, but that's just how it was. And we didn't win a final or anything there at the Dragons, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, unfortunate, but I guess along with the frustrations of kind of being injured, it must have been nice to see what Brian had done. Firstly, in 1991, where St George got close to making it to the top 5, to being in 1992, where they made to the grand final, when you'd kind of played in some sides where you'd only won 8 or 9 games, and you were probably 10 or 12 or 14 points away from making the semi-finals. Must have been a nice vibe around the club at that time, and what Brian had done to kind of restructure everything and make St George a very competitive side in the 1990s.
Yeah, exactly right. And he revolutionised the coaching thing. And obviously a lot more video work and how we could be a better team as a collective group and so forth. And I quite enjoyed his coaching, to be truthful. He's pretty ruthless too in some areas, and but at the end of the day, that's what it is, and I think I was probably 32
Yep.
then, and, it was time to probably move on, I would have thought. I could have probably gone with another couple of clubs, but, went over and played in Cairn in the beautiful Riviera, and
worst places.
Won a comp over there.
Yeah, worst places to finish your career, Wally.
Oh my word, that's right. We had a lovely time over there.
What was that experience like? And I guess what was the quality of rugby league like over in France? Because you'd been there exactly a decade before in 1982-83, and then you come back 10 years later. What was obviously wonderful to win a premiership? What was the quality of the football like? And I guess just the aspect of being involved in that French culture in a lovely region of France.
Well, you can't beat the culture. The culture's wonderful over there. But to have that ability to live in calm, and actually I was only telling someone yesterday, when I had this little Fiat thing, that little car that the club was part of my package, I got a car, and we went down to Barcelona, and we were only there for about 5 minutes, parked in the middle of the city, and we'd taken 2 steps away from the car. Next minute, someone had smashed the window in the car to try and get in there and get the camera that we left at the bottom of the passengers front passenger seat thing. And anyway, the company Euro car, I think it was done through. They had another base in Barcelona, and then we go and swapped. I said, here's the car and all the rest of it. They gave me back a big 4-door sedan with an electric window, what do you call it, a sunroof, electric windows. And so it was a good job, well done there. But, that was good. And we won the competition, which was fantastic. And we were on this bus, in France, and they had the film festival at the time, and we were sort of going right through the middle of it, with this trophy up in the front of the bus. Oh, it was fantastic,
Was that the kind of end of your at least your professional footballing career, Wally, when you finished with Cairn?
Yes, I did go out to Western Queensland, Western New South Wales, a place called Forbes. Someone said, I'll come out there and have a bit of a run around. So I did that, and then I hurt my back and had a back operation, and that was the end of it. So
yeah. What's life looked like you post kind of your rugby league career? I know you've been doing some great work with the Men of League Foundation. What else does life look like for you now?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I really enjoyed it was now called the Family League, but to because it resonates better than just Men of League. I really enjoyed that. We go and helping people. Often go up the spinal ward up at the PA hospital and with the Princess Alexandra Hospital, and see some of the people there, because some of the people there that have, broken their neck and they can't do anything other than lie on a flat bed.
Yeah.
Some of them have got no one to come and see them at all.
Yeah, that's so
not
sad,
anyone.
yeah.
It's very sad, and I sort of get a bit of a kick out of just telling a few stories or asking them about their life and so forth, and it's helped me in that particular way, and making sure that players are on that, because it's a big one stage you're with all your teammates, and you have that great bond, and then next minute it's just you and the missus and the kids, and and there's no sort of telling any sort of jokes and all that sort of thing. That sort of goes from one, you're in this group of 20 odd players that inside and out, to not having that interaction, if you know what I mean. It's a big loss for a while until you get things over and back into life and so forth. So, life's been pretty good, thank you. I just, I like to keep myself sort of fit and, up to speed with life, I suppose, and, just try and it's sort of, I'm sort of a, I like a drink when it goes with the the boys, but I always feel like it's like when I played footy, I won't sort of drink during the week, if there's something on Friday night or Sunday, I think I'm going up there to help compare the Toowoomba Rugby League tomorrow night, and, with Kevin, I forget his name, but he had about Kevin. He's another player there, and and it keeps you involved in that, and you see all the good groups. I did the same thing last year, and I couldn't believe the size of the women's. How it had grown, the women's rugby league. And it's really sort of taken on. And we'll have a look at it now. It's on TV before the games, and it's it's one of those sort of things that's evolved so quickly, and it can only be better. It can only be better for the game, Jack. If you think about it, it's wonderful in that way. And so if you sort of keeping yourself involved in those sort of things, and I do a few speaking engagements, maybe out in the country, and sort of come Origin time and all that sort of thing, and just telling different, funny sort of circumstances that occur or whatever. So, it's you try and keep your feet, within in that rugby league arena a little bit. Yeah, that helps.
Well, you kind of spoke, I guess, to finish, you kind of spoke before about the fact that you still love to watch rugby league, which I think is such a great thing, because we've chatted with a lot of former Dragons and Steelers players, and some players, I guess it's been such a massive part of their life for 25, 30, 35 years that they just want a bit of a break from it. But I guess someone like you that has watched a lot of rugby league, probably not very pretty viewing when you're watching the Dragons this year, but I guess what's your opinion on the club, especially with Shane Flanagan coming in next year? Do you think that the Dragons can kind of turn things around and at least be a little bit more improved in 2024, Wal?
Well, of course, and I think he's just the right person to come in at this time, and he's won a premiership there with Cronulla. I've listened to him commentating on the 4BC or whatever it might be, or and the radio, and then he's got a real good. And actually, he made his debut when I was playing together. But, and he's got a really good rugby league mind, and knows what he's looking for. He understands the game extremely well. And he'll do a really good thing there at the Dragons. I'm really looking forward to seeing what will happen. And hopefully Ben Hunt sticks around and it honours his contract. Yeah. I think it'd be fantastic for him, because he's pretty hard marker, and really where I've seen success in my sort of footy career is where you really get on well with the coach. He's got a good ability to keep everyone together and strive to be better yourself as an individual, and also that rolls on to being successful for the team. And I think that's all part of that thing. But because the game has evolved so quickly over the last few years, you need someone to reinvigorate things, get a different view on how he would like his football team to be, and have the appropriate players in those positions to be successful, And I think that's one of those important things that we've been a bit hit and miss there, the Dragons, over the last few years, and we just don't seem to get it together, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And you'd know that watching the Dragons themselves, and I try and watch it every Dragons game, and 1 minute they're in it, next minute, there's like the smoko time, and they're not sort of playing up. Look, have a look at the way Penrith play. Everyone knows each other's moves, how they play. And they, if things aren't going right, they just cart it up. Just get that march up the field, and then everything then falls into place. But it all starts from having a couple of good players, particularly someone like a good halfback. And, if we can keep Benny Hunt there at the Dragons, we can only be better off.
Yeah. Well, Wally, we want to thank you for your time and jumping on the Red V podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last hour chatting about your time at St. George, but your career in rugby league, and I'm sure the listeners have enjoyed it as well. I just want to thank you for your time this afternoon, mates, and all the best for the future. Thanks for joining me on the Red V podcast.
Well, it's very kind of you, Jack. It's been a pleasure, mate. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
Huge thanks to Wally for getting involved and jumping on the podcast. Chatted with him a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately had, a little bit of technical problems with some of the audio, so I do apologise about that. That was kind of mainly in the first part of the chat, but great to have a chat with Wally. We've got some great off-season content. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Jeff Armstrong, the great historian and author of the Spirit of the Red V books, I had a chat with him yesterday on Monday afternoon, and we're doing a retrospective look of the Dragons and Steelers in the 1980s, talking about Roy Masters, talking about that 85 grand final, talking about the fading of the Dragons in the late 80s and moving to the Sydney Cricket Ground, amongst a lot of other things. So looking forward to playing that for you next week, and we'll also be having a giveaway. Jeff's been very generous enough to give away both volumes of the Spirit of the Red V. He'll post them out to you free of charge. We will have a little competition set up in our social media, and we'll announce the winner next week here on episode 194 of the Red V podcast. But alongside that, Tony Kane, we've had a chat with him, speaking with Sean Timmins on Thursday. So some great interviews, great content. Really looking forward to bringing these to you during the off-season. Appreciate all you fans tuning in, even though the Dragons regular season is done and dusted. Before we finish off episode 193 of the podcast here tonight, we want to jump in and have a look at your Fans Corner questions for this week. And we've had 3 fans that have fired questions into us. Kurt, our first one is from Trent Moffat on Facebook. And Trent has said, "Hey boys, was wondering how you rated the performance of the boys in the Aussie team over the weekend." Kurt, I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch too much of the Prime Minister's 13. I thought it was solid. There's probably some question marks around Michael Molo getting selection there, but I thought he was relatively solid. Sloan scored a nice try, but kind of seemed like he lacked a bit of confidence. I think he actually got moved to the wing at some stage during that game. And obviously, I think Ben Hunt and Zach Lomax were fairly well involved in that game. I know, speaking to a good Dragons mate of mine, we kind of both agreed that it probably reinforced that Ben Hunt is a number 9 and is a hooker. He played pretty well in that 9 role. What did you make of the performances if you did manage to catch the game on the weekend, Kurt?
Yeah, I basically got the second half. I noticed quite quickly how strong the winds were up there. When you throw into that the crowd itself, and the fact that that these guys are top echelon players, but they've also just been thrown together for the weekend. So it was quite clunky in terrible conditions when NRL players aren't quite used to such a wind tunnel going down the ground, how strong it was.
Yeah.
I thought Milo, I don't think anything really stood out, so I don't really want to bring up the Sloan missed tackle for that try on the line, because there were a few other Australian players left on the ground as well. But Sloan, again, we've spoken about this before, it's his core strength that needs to be worked on in off season, so I'm not going to pick him out for that, because
and the thing is, Flanagan hasn't worked with him at all, so it's not like Flanagan's come in as coach and spent 6 months with him. We're still seeing the same mistakes, so I'm sure it would have been a valuable experience for him.
Yeah, and look, to answer the question, I take absolutely nothing out of it, but except for the fact that for the players that are picked, especially the young players for the Dragons, to be able to go and see what it means to another country, what rugby league means to them, that watch them every week, kind of takes them out of their comfort box a little bit. And if those players come back to Australia, I'm not talking about Jake, Turbo, or Cherry. I'm talking about Sloan and
the younger players.
Yeah, the Titans kid, the winger Khan, and guys like that. They come back to their teams and go, you know what? Let's put this in perspective. I'm getting paid a shitload of money to do something I love, and these guys are up there, like treating us like the Rolling Stones in the 70s kind of thing. I hope they got something out of it, because it does mean something to go up there, and I think that's why the Australian or the NRL sends players up there to show them and put stuff in perspective. So, look, they won. The game was what it was, but I think the experience is the most important part for those guys.
Our good mate Sean Ganano has sent through another question. Sean said, lots of uncertainty over the 2024 playing roster, but what would you lads consider a successful first season under Flano? Also, what shots will you boys be hitting this off-season for some new socks to go over the microphones? The official Dragons podcast wants to know. Well, I've got plenty of socks in the drawer, Sean, so don't know if we need to go out. I might try and get some fun socks, though, maybe some Dragons themed socks. I've got my Coke socks that I throw over the microphone at the moment, so we appreciate the question and the support, Sean. I'll throw this to you in a sec, Kurt, but I think for me, not just what first grade does, I think in terms of first grade, I think a 9 or 10 win season, just basically looking at surface level for the Dragons, would be the improvement I'd like to see. I think on top of that, just a general improvement through the players. If we can see Tyrell Sloan, if he is the fullback, to be a better defensive player and putting his body on the line more, or Zach Lomax perhaps kicking at a high percentage rate and continuing that long streak of form that we saw at the back end of the season. I think that's the things I'm looking for. I don't think I'm under any illusions that I don't think Flanagan's going to come in there and turn the Dragons into a 15 or 16 win side. He very well may. He wants to turn them into a semi-final side. He said he expects to play semi-final football, but I also look at the squad and realise that certainly there's a few positions that need to be upgraded. So I think on the surface level, generally seeing players improving, and maybe kind of a 9 to 10 win season is something that I'd be pleased with. But I think on top of that as well, Sean, for me, I know I've kind of spoken about it a fair bit on the podcast, but Flanagan said he wants to improve the pathways. So the Dragons and Steelers failed to make the semi-finals in any competition this year. That includes Maddie's Cup, SG Ball, and Tarshigal Cup for both St George and Illawarra, and then Jersey Flegg reserve grade and first grade failed to make the finals as well. So I think that has shown that there are glaring issues with the pathways and with coaching and development and all of those kinds of things. So I would like to see, if first grade don't make the finals and improve and win 9 or 10 games, that's great. But I'd love to see Jersey Flegg and reserve grade and some of our junior rep sides in the semi-finals. Admittedly, Illawarra generally have been in the semi-finals for the SG Ball and the Maddie's Cup competition in the past. And maybe this season was just a bit of an off year, a bit of a lull year for them. But I would love to see, some advancement in the pathways, in junior and senior pathways. See the Dragons playing semi-final football and maybe even taking out the premiership or getting close to taking out the premiership. Because I think at least in Jersey Flegg and reserve grade, there is a lot of quality down there. You look at some of the NRL players that played in the reserve grade competition for the Dragons, and even the likes of the Couchman boys and Trey Stewart and Licking King Thorgair and some of those other players that performed pretty well in the New South Wales Cup system. There was a chance they could have gone on a bit of a run. So I want to see improvement throughout the whole club, throughout the whole club, Kurt. Not just players individually, but also performances. And I think that extends from first grade down into the lower grades and even down to the junior rep levels at the Illawarra and St George level, Kurt.
I've been saying for weeks the Dragons aren't that far away. and the difference will be Flanagan and how he coaches the team in the off-season. You guys, yes, on the table itself, by the end of the year, you missed the finals by a fair whack. But that's because of the games you lost during the season by those 2, 4, 6 points.
That's right.
So the things the points you just made, Flanagan will make them better in those points, which gives you those wins. Some of these teams at the bottom of the ladder this year did not deserve to make the 8. Some of those sides were poor, really poor. So if you measure it like that, the Dragons are not that far away. And I was really happy to hear Flanagan say that this week or maybe the week before and said, we do have the players to make the 8. That's kind of what the quote I saw. But it's just how they react. So they aren't that far away. And I think the benchmark for me, and I might be a little bit more ruthless, but and I say this for my West Tigers as well. You don't make the finals, you don't make the top 8, fault the season. It's a failure. If you do not make the 8 in the NRL in such a close competition, you're doing something wrong, and people should be moved on. You should make the 8. That's your goal every year. Make the 8. Get to September.
Yep. No, I agree. Well, we'll see if that happens, Kurt. Hopefully it does. I know there's plenty of optimism and hopefully, a few more bodies come through the Dragons' doors and can certainly help that push for the top 8 in season 2024. We're going to wrap up with our last question made by George on Instagram, and George has said, hey guys, the Broncos went from the spoon to the grand final in 3 years, yet we went from a grand final to bottom of the heap for the better part of 10 years. I see a lot of similarities in the two clubs, both coached by old boys, both with an experienced halfback, both with up-and-coming juniors and a star fullback. My question is, how did they get it so right, yet we've continued to get it so wrong, Kurt?
There's parts of this I agree with and parts I don't. I think purely speaking on the Broncos for a second, for all their off-field issues, and they have had their own issues in the last 5 to 10 years, they have never been far away from being a superpower again. The roster at the Broncos always doesn't seem to be that short or that light, and they have a base to work off and to shoot off at any given time. So the difference between their worst and what it takes for them to turn it around is much more quicker than what the Dragons can, which has been death by 1,000 cuts for years.
I'll just interrupt you quickly, Kurt, and because this was the Brisbane side for round 1 2020. So the fullback was Jermaine Azako, Corey Oates, Jesse Arthur's wings, Katoni Staggs, Darius Boyd centre, Milford, Brodie Croft in the halves, Thomas Flegler, Jake Turpin, Payne Haas in the front row, and a back row of Dave Fafita, Tavita Pangai, and Pat Carrigan, and then Andrew McCulloch, Reece Kennedy, Jamil Hopewadi, and Herbie Farnworth on the bench. So for a side that won the wooden spoon in inverted commas or in air quotes, they had a lot of quality in that side, and it could have just been the fact that things went wrong that year. And when you've got a city of 3 million people supporting you, businesses supporting you, and the run of money that would be coming into the club there, I think you're right. They're never that far away from, if not being in a grand final, being a regular kind of top 4, top 8 football side.
Any team that's struggling right now would look at that 1 to 13 maybe and go, I would take that every day of the week.
Well, they had Anthony Seibold as coach as well, so that's probably what hamstrung them, yeah.
Yeah, look, the expectation for the Broncos is a lot higher as an organisation, and it's been that way for a long time. If something isn't working, something is not done, they fix it. If that doesn't work, they'll go and do something else and make a call. And they'll keep making calls until they find they're successful again. I spoke... like I've spoken before about Flanagan or the Dragons need to start expecting themselves to be, the goal is top 8 no matter what. If that's your marker of expectation for next year, the Dragons will play better because they expect more from themselves. And the club itself will expect more from themselves. And more people will think their jobs are on the line. The Broncos want to be the best, and that's they've always wanted to be the best. I think the Dragons need to start shooting a little bit higher. And I think that's what Flanagan's bringing in. It's like, this is the new target. This is the benchmark. And look, I think there's going to be players there that'll be absolutely spewing at Flanagan during summer, spewing at Flanagan. And I mean that literally and otherwise. Yeah. But they will start to respect Flanagan. And when the results come next year, if they believe in what Flanagan is doing, they will win more games of football. They will become bigger superstars. They will become the guys they idolise. They will make more money. They'll have more girls if they're single, or they'll have a bigger house. But until they buy into something, which they haven't had at that club for so long, they will continue to be crap.
Yeah.
And people will look at them in the streets and go, oh, you could be, and they'll get weird comments and stuff like that. If they want to be superstars, just shut up and listen to Flanagan. That's all I'll say.
That's great advice. Yep. No, very, very well done, Kurt. I think that's a nice way to put a bow on our Dragons Fans Corner segment this week on the podcast. As always, you can get your questions into us. Doesn't just have to be on Tuesday. Send them any time of the week to us, redvpodcast@gmail.com. That's redvpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on our socials, on Facebook, the Red V Podcast, on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called now, at Red V Podcast 1, and also on Instagram, the Red V Podcast. We'll give you updates on what's happening with the Dragons and, of course, continue to punch out quality content in regards to what is happening at the Red V Podcast. That also brings us to the end of episode 193 of the Red V Podcast tonight. Kurt, as always, mate, pleasure to be chatting footy with you, mate, and we'll do it again at the same time next week.
Thank you, buddy. Don't forget, guys, it's 20-11 tonight in the 2023 Rugby League Hottest 100. You can find that on the 81st Minute social channels and our YouTube channel. Pretty please.
Yep, make sure you check that out. Big thanks to Kurt Woodward doing a fantastic job tonight. Don't forget, we're going to have our giveaway next week and it's going to be announced on episode 194 of the Red V Podcast. So make sure you stick close to our socials. Jeff Armstrong generously giving away the 2 books of the Spirit of the Red V, volumes 1 and 2, and free postage to you wherever you are in Australia as well. So if you're keen for that, make sure you keep an eye on our social media pages, especially next Tuesday. Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Another episode done and dusted for the Red V Podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday, where Jeff will be chatting with me on a trip down memory lane to talk about the St. George Dragons and the Illawarra Steelers in the 1980s. And of course, we'll have everything in regards to the St. George Illawarra Dragons in the off-season. But until next Tuesday, on behalf of Curtis Woodward, I've been Jack Clifton. Let's go those mighty Dragons.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
From iHeart Podcasts, Supreme, The Battle for Roe, tells the story of the unlikely champions behind the landmark case Roe v. Wade, starring Maya Hawke as 26-year-old lead attorney Sarah Weddington.
We're challenging the Texas abortion laws in federal court.
And Academy Award nominee William H. Macy as Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun.
Time is not the most important factor. Getting it right is.
Listen to the podcast Supreme, The Battle for Roe on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.